Do you ever get the feeling that the language we use can actually be more distracting than helpful? I would say that in the relationship world, we have more language about the challenges that we have than ever before. We talk about things like ghosting and love bombing and narcissism. People know more about attachment styles than ever before. But I'm going to do this video here with myself and Roy. He's going to hop on in a moment, about where we put our attention on if it's actually working, or are we just becoming people who are really educated about relationships? We've got the lingo, the therapy lingo, the coaching lingo, and it's not actually making a difference in our relationships, which is the whole point anyway. As coaches, we can easily use this kind of language without actually making a difference for people. I think sometimes we use coaching language even to sound smart or to sound qualified. But that's missing the whole point. That's inauthentic. It's inauthentic. What are we actually doing this for? We're doing these conversations to be able to actually make a difference in our relationships. But sometimes we miss that point. Sometimes instead we choose to get smart. I'm going to learn all the words and I'm going to learn all the right things to say. And I'm going to have the language around narcissism and all these different things. And let me just bring in Roy for a second. And so Roy and I are going to be discussing what we put our attention on and how we can actually influence in our relationships in a productive way. I just said yes to Roy join. There we go.
There we
are. We got it. Welcome, Roy. How you doing, my friend?
I'm doing awesome. Don't you love technology?
Love it when it works. Hate it when it doesn't.
Yep. And here we are.
So, welcome. I want to welcome Roy. If you don't know Roy, Roy is one of the Love Understood coaches. He is one of the first people to ever inspire me to become a coach. He was one of the first coaches I worked with 11 years ago. And we are family, I would say. And now I have the privilege of, being on your team with Love Understood. So we're going to do this live here, inspired by a conversation you and I were having about 30 minutes ago around language and attention. So welcome. Go for it.
Thank you.
Yeah, I already pulled people in a little bit. I already brought, I tried to hook them a little bit with some things. So why don't you start off by telling us what your intention of this conversation is around love, around attention and language.
Okay, great. In our conversation, and thank you all for being here today. I'm inspired by seeing all the people that have joined. And we're having this conversation around language and what language actually creates and out in the world. Or as Joe Dispenza says, in the quantum field, what we say is what's being created in front of us. And one of the things that I notice about language is it's something that we put our attention on. So my intention of this conversation is for you and I and others to get highly responsible for what language am I using? What do I have my attention on in the language that I'm speaking? Because in our life, we have a say over two things. What am I speaking? What am I saying? What words am I using? And what do I have my attention on?
So I want to talk about that. I want to break that down for a little bit. So you say that we have a say over two things: what we put our attention on and
what words we're speaking or what language we're using.
What language we're using. Okay, how we speak and what we put our attention on. Those are the things we have a say about. Now, would you say that that's how most of us are walking around and operating?
No, I would say that most of us are not, do not understand that. And we're using language that is, we think that what we're speaking is causing something when it's actually not, because we could get into this. We'll get into this as we get into this. but what is it that we actually have our attention on? So, because what I have my attention on is what I'm going to say, what comes out of my mouth is what I have my attention on. So let's just start breaking this down a little bit. So I heard you before I joined talking about using language inside of relationships, for example, and the words that we use for the people that we're in relationship with, like the words like, well, he's an avoidant and I'm a this. So what are some of the words that you know inside of relationships, Simon?
Yeah, well, I mean, the most trending ones these days are, avoidant, anxious, narcissist is a huge popular one these days.
Mm-hmm.
Red flags is a common term these days. What's another one?
Boundaries,
boundaries, yeah. Bare minimum.
Yeah.
That's a big one. I did a post that actually one of the posts that is probably one of my most popular posts. Disrupting the idea that if they wanted to, they would. That's a common phrase. So yeah, those are some of the languages that people have heard on social media or in therapy or with coaches that I think has missed the mark.
Yeah, and I concur on that, because when we look, let's take one of those words.
Someone said a good one, toxic. Someone in the comments just said
toxic. Yeah, right.
Another one.
There's another one, toxic. So let's use that word toxic. So that's a commonly used word. So what does toxic actually mean in the dictionary?
I don't know. Do you want me to look it up?
Yeah. Look it up. What is it? What's the actual definition of that word toxic?
Just give me a moment. Yeah, and that's another thing that you see people do is people ask each other, how do you define that? What's your definition? It's like, well, that's not how it works. The word has a definition, but it's like, well, I define toxic as this. It's like, okay, well, if you got your own definition for a bunch of different words, then how are we supposed to have a conversation together when I don't know your definitions?
Exactly. So now it gets even more to that, because once we find out what's the definition of toxic.
So we got, as an adjective, it is poisonous. In quotations, the dumping of toxic waste. As a noun, it's very harmful or unpleasant in a pervasive or insidious way.
Okay.
So harmful, unpleasant, yeah.
Okay. So now, as you just pointed to, each one of us has, in relationship, has our own definition of what each one of those words mean, which is in itself bizarre. Yeah. As you said, how in the world are we supposed to communicate when we're banting about these such words with people? Because in reality, are humans toxic?
No.
No, they're not. The relationship may be unworkable. It may have parts of it that are unworkable. However, when we use a word like toxic in a relationship, now this is where the attention part comes in. What do we actually have our attention on in that moment when we're using a word like toxic?
I would say we have our attention on everything that we think is toxic.
Yes, we have our attention on everything that we think is toxic. Okay, let's take a deeper cut of that. So if it looks like we have our attention on everything that's toxic, let's go behind that. What would have us have our attention on everything that's toxic?
I'm thinking where we're looking, what would have our attention on? I'm not really sure. What would have our attention on where things are toxic? I mean, I would say I'm having an experience that's harmful.
Okay.
And I'm looking to make sense of it.
Okay. So let me ask you this. So am I looking over there for why it's going on, or am I looking over here with me, what has me use that language?
No, I'm looking outwardly to label an experience or a person.
Great. So what do I have my attention on by using that
What's outside
word?
what's outside of me.
Yeah, I actually have my attention on blame. It's over
Yeah.
there with someone else.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, it's disguised as it's toxic.
Yeah.
So what do you see from that?
And what I see in it is it's a very powerless way to go about relationships in life. You know, it really has me not get to influence anything. Like, and that's kind of the point of the call we're having, the session we're having today is how these labels or language have become toxic. How these labels and language have really missed the intention of them. You know, like I see people, especially in the comment section of a lot of my posts, that are, I'm going to do another live on this, but my least favorite one that I see these days is, this is my ex. So I'll be doing one of my skits and someone will go, this is my ex.
Yeah.
So in my opinion, we've totally missed the point. Okay, you saw a video that could have been very valuable for you about how you show up in relationships, but what you saw was, this crappy behavior is an example of my ex, which means now I'm completely void of any responsibility for what happened, and I get to reinforce my perspective that my ex was bad or toxic or whatever it might be. And they may have been, by the way.
Yes. Yeah.
But that doesn't change a damn thing for us.
It does not. And so right there, we have our attention on, again, making sure that it lands over there. The finger points somewhere else rather than looking over here with me. So I have my attention on by labels and name calling, is I have my attention on avoiding being responsible for how I occur in a relationship.
And I want to point out something really important that you just shared there. When we say, like, you have the blame on them rather than looking at us, the goal is not to shift blame from outward to inward. The goal is actually to take blame out of the equation. And when people work with Roy and myself, it's common that people associate responsibility with who's to blame.
Yeah.
You know, you hear people say, you're responsible for this. Well, what I'm really saying is, you're the one to blame for this. Or, I'm responsible for this, which really I'm saying, I'm the one to blame for this. It's like, no. What we're talking about is taking blame out of the equation. When we say responsibility, we say where we have power, where we can actually influence something. I can be responsible for how I speak on this live. I have power over that. I'm choosing to have power over that. And so I just want to clarify that important piece, because what I see a lot with the people we work with, and even, you know, people in messages and comments, is they've gone from blaming others to blaming themselves.
Yeah, and ultimately, let's take this back a bit further. You're onto something here, because when we're blaming someone else and we've got our attention on that, and this whole thing that is so beautiful about attention. When we start being highly responsible, or as a friend of mine said, radically responsible for what we have our attention on, what's behind blaming someone else?
I mean, a lot of things. The first thing that came to my mind is my attention is on how the world or that person is against me. You know, how life's unfair.
Yeah.
How attention's on being a victim, I might even say.
Yeah, it's attention on being a victim. Yeah, bang on. And the victim, how we victimize ourselves of making ourselves wrong, or blaming ourselves for blaming someone else. Like, it's insidious.
What do you mean by that?
Well, when we're blaming someone else, I'm wondering, when I've done this over time, is that I'm actually avoiding, and we were having this conversation earlier today, I'm avoiding actually making myself wrong or blaming someone else, who is ultimately, I'm blaming myself for the whole thing.
Yeah.
And I love what you just said, because there is nothing wrong in what happens in relationship. It's either workable or unworkable. So
And
when
that's,
we,
I mean, that's a big, again, this is one of the things, like, speaking of language, you know, you and I say that so consistently that it's become part of our language. Like,
uh-huh,
you and I look through the world of what works and what doesn't work.
yes,
But most people look through the world as what's wrong and what's right.
yes,
And
which
when
is
we look
morality.
through the world, yeah, which is we look through it morally. And most people would say that's a good thing. We should be moral human beings. The challenge that then creates is we're often looking for who's right and who's wrong, which means we're looking for someone to blame and someone
Mm-hmm.
to celebrate, which is what we see in relationships is we see people not being on the same team.
Yeah,
I'm right and you're wrong. Now, when what you're talking about is so important because you're saying, does this work? How are we communicating in a way that actually works? When our intention's on that, now we start to focus on what solutions we can create, how we can make a difference.
mm-hmm.
But when our attention's on who's right and who's wrong, we're not focused on solutions. We're not focused on shifting the dynamic. We're focused on who can we make responsible for this? Who can we blame for this? Maybe it's me, maybe it's you. And if we go that route, it's guaranteed that we're going to feel unfulfilled and disempowered, or the other person will be.
Yeah, and ultimately, what we're attempting to do is shift the responsibility off of ourselves onto someone else.
Mm-hmm.
Take
Mm-hmm.
the attention off of ourselves. The experience that we feel when we're making something wrong or ourself wrong or blaming ourselves. We as humans want to avoid that experience at all costs. And
And why do you think we want to? Why do you think we want to avoid that?
it's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
It's uncomfortable because it's in the world of language. So we were all trained to blame, shame, or guilt. That's the nature of what it is to be a human, which is in the world of making something wrong or morality. And then when we alter that with language that is such as was that workable or unworkable, as you're just alluding to, it shifts. That shifts the whole experience of blame, shame, or guilt off of us. It has us be responsible for, well, okay, well, what worked and what didn't work? What actions did I take that worked? What actions did I take that didn't work? So we can
And let's
actually see something there.
give a real basic example here. So that might sound like with your partner or friend, you shouldn't talk to me like that. Okay, you know, I say that to you. Now suddenly you're feeling defensive or attacked, right?
Yep.
You shouldn't talk to me like that. That's in the world of morality. Now, what we're talking about, you and I, Roy, in this conversation is it doesn't work for me to talk. It doesn't work for me when you talk to me like that.
Yes.
Now, when I say that, it doesn't work for me when you talk to me like that, I'm taking responsibility. I'm not judging or blaming you for it. I'm simply sharing that it doesn't work for me. Thus,
Exactly.
giving you space to not get defensive.
Mm-hmm.
It's a whole new world to live in communication. This is what we're really training people on, is to be able to shift, create the fork in the road from our usual cycle of blame, resentment, guilt, shame. That's the usual, the predictable version, to, ooh, I catch myself wanting to go there. Feeling a little uncomfortable right now, so I'd like to cling to my behaviors I'm used to. Or I can let go of that and actually look from the world of what works and what doesn't work.
Yeah, right there. What now have we shifted our attention to?
We've shifted our attention to what works and what doesn't work.
Right, which is what?
How we want to communicate to each other, love and connection, the importance of that relationship.
Yes. Well, it's in the realm of, well, what matters to me? What actually
Yeah.
matters? what is my view of myself? Now, the other thing here that I see so clearly is that whole concept of boundaries is and boundary in the dictionary is defined as a line, something you don't cross over. And then when we're in this world of what you just created here about workable, unworkable, what matters to me, and I'm communicating that on an open, loving, kind, with the intention of having love and affinity present, is a boundary actually necessary if I'm standing in that place of power?
Well, I think it just works. I think you're not. I think like that's another example around boundaries. Like that's a common language these days. I think some people are getting obsessed with setting boundaries and maintaining boundaries, and oh, I didn't have the right boundaries. But like you said, if you're operating from a place of power, and we don't mean power over people, by the way, we mean power in ourselves. When you're operating from that place, well, then the boundaries just sort of align themselves. You don't have to control other people and what they should or shouldn't do. It just starts to work. That's what
Exactly. Because that whole context of using the language of boundaries has a human being, and I've seen this over and over and over again, is the world gets extremely small because it has to be managed inside of the boundaries.
And that's exhausting.
That's exhausting because it's either workable or unworkable. And if I'm in the context and I have my attention on what works and what doesn't work, if I have my attention on being kind and being responsible for my language, well, the world expands. I don't no longer need, I'm unmessable with. Nobody can, a boundary is unnecessary because I'm unmessable with when I'm clean with my language, when I'm clean with my intentions, if I'm highly responsible for what I have my attention on. It's a profound way to live. And it's I love this conversation because it's the other thing that keeps showing up in the conversations that I've been hearing lately is, oh, they're a narcissist or I'm an avoidant and all this thing, or they're an avoidant. I'm like, well,
ADHD is another one, by the way.
ADHD. Yeah, the first thing that comes to my mind is, when did you get your degree in psychology or psychiatry? The only people that are actually qualified to use those statements are professionals who've gone to school and who have doctorates in behavior science. So I'm inviting us all to remove that speaking out of our language.
Yeah.
Just remove the judgment and the innuendo that gets created from using that type of language.
And what would you put in? What would you have take its place?
What I would have take its place is to have language is used for conversation. We created language, and there are some 300 languages on the planet, probably more. That's just a guesstimate. We've created language for one purpose, and one purpose only, is to have a conversation. And conversation means to converse with another.
To connect.
To create love and affinity. Because who can actually create love and affinity?
I think anybody can.
Yes, but where does it start?
Well, I see it as it starts with a thought or an intention, which comes from language.
Yeah. Well, and it starts with me. I'm the one that's going to create love and affinity.
Well,
if
you choose it to be that way. But this is again the point of our work and why we're having this conversation, is because many people are walking around going, love and affinity is only possible if they choose it to be that way. If my ex does, if my mom does, if the world does, if the politicians do, it's like it's always out there, and that doesn't work.
And if Mercury's not in retrograde, all of that, which is which is all over there with someone else. So right there, when we come look back again, what do we actually have our attention on when we're doing that? We have our attention on avoiding being responsible for, I'm the one that gets to say what level of love and affinity I'm going to create in the world through conversing with another. I get to say,
to me, the big takeaway from this conversation is being responsible for where I put my attention gives me a ton of power. And I think that what you're intending in this conversation, what we're intending as coaches, is to support people to recognize that where we put our attention is actually a choice. It's not a result of the environment or a default experience, that I actually can choose where I put my attention. But again, for you and I, and how we have this conversation, you and I both have had a lot of training, that does take training. You know, and we're not trying to sit here and tell people just think positive. That's not what we're saying. We're not saying that. We're not saying just like,
not at all.
We're inviting you to take a look at where your attention is right now. And can you be willing to be responsible for where it is and where you want to put it? Because if you can transform your life.
In a moment.
In a moment where you go from disempowered, life sucks, I can't do anything, nobody loves me, it's brutal, to something's possible for me here. I have a lot to offer. People do love me. The world is full of opportunities. And all of a sudden, that gives way to a new version of us. That, in my opinion, is the whole point of coaching and what we do, is to actually give way to that version of us that's already right there. But, like you're pointing to in this conversation, I've gotten so used to putting my attention on what's wrong, on who's to blame, on how unfair life is, on what my ex should have done differently, all these different things which are actually perpetuating the cycle that I'm in. So what is absolutely possible and not even necessarily difficult to break this cycle and create a new future for ourselves. But we have to be willing, like you're saying, to get responsible for where we're putting our attention.
And I know what I've noticed about this over time is we're not done either. There isn't a moment that we get to. It's like, aha, I don't ever have to be responsible anymore for what I have my attention on. It's a way of living. And being responsible in every moment for what do I have my attention on. And, you know, if I'm in an upset, that doesn't mean upset's going to go away. If I'm upset with a partner, or in some situation I'm in, it's what's my intention of my upset, and what do I have my attention on that has me be upset? Like, whoa, it can disappear in a nanosecond by being in that place of utilizing language as it's designed. And because what's an intention and what's my attention on. Similar words and completely different contexts that get created from language.
And that, what you're sharing there, is what inspired me to get coaching and to become a coach. Is I saw people like you who were unmessable with, who would get triggered and then deal with that trigger and overcome it, become more powerful than it in seconds. I saw you do that when you used to lead me in self-expression and leadership. And I was like, holy shit, I want that. I know what it's like to be triggered. I know what it's like to feel stuck. I just witnessed Roy go from stuck to unstuck in 6 seconds. What the fuck? For me, it takes a month or 2 weeks or whatever. And it's like, screw that. Someone said, give an example. It might be something so basic as your partner says, take out the trash. You forgot to take out the trash. And you get transported to that moment where your mom used to constantly remind you of shit. And you get triggered and pissed off. And now all of a sudden you think your partner's a nag and annoying and pushy when all they said was, you forgot to take out the trash.
Yeah.
Now, with the skill of being able to recognize what's really going on and to release that or trigger, all of a sudden, I hear that, I see myself get triggered, I catch it, and now I'm thanking her for the reminder and we're connected.
Exactly. And then because what that actually the person has their attention on in that moment is avoiding inadequacy by being triggered by a statement like taking out the garbage. Is the attention's on avoiding inadequacy.
Yeah, I feel inadequate and I don't want to feel inadequate, so I'm going to defend myself. All this is just wiring. It's just programmed stuff. And so what we're talking about, someone asked, give an example. We're talking about breaking up the program, redesigning how it works. That's a skill.
Yeah, it is. It's an incredible skill, and it's ongoing. And you know, when we were talking earlier before we started this around, you know, all the different types of, like, surgeons have their own language, and their language is all around the parts of the body and the knives that they use and the protocols that they use. And then a mechanic has their own language that they use to bring workability to their trade and profession. And an accountant has their own language that is critical to them having all the numbers balance. And a pharmacist has their own language. And even a gardener and a lawn cutter has their own language that they utilize for them to be highly effective in their field. And coaching is no different. We are out to be and have all of our people that we work with to be highly effective in their lives, to be highly highly able to produce what they're out to produce. And it's all done through the use of language. And because we have our own language in the coaching field, we have our language, the language that empowers people to fulfill on what matters to them. We have the language that empowers people to complete the past and create a world for themselves and a context for them to live in that's extraordinary. And it is its own language, like a physician, like a doctor, like a pharmacist, like a lawn cutter.
Even you could even say it in the way that, you know, the language I used to talk about myself. You know, we're talking to ourselves all day long. Thoughts, maybe you're aware of it, maybe you're not aware of it, but you forget something and you think you're stupid. You know, someone says something nice to you and you don't believe them because you don't think that people are honest. It's like all this is self-talk. Well, that creates the world we live in. That creates our personality, creates how we show up, how we operate, and thus creates how our life is. You know, there's the ripple effects are everywhere. Now, someone, just to side note here, someone said, but what if the person being triggered isn't able to identify that? I'm dealing with this right now. Someone commented that. What do you say to that, Roy?
They're not able to identify it?
Yeah, I think this person's talking about someone else, maybe someone that they're with, and they're saying, what if the person being triggered isn't able to identify that?
Okay, so when someone is triggered and they're not able to identify, there's only one way that there is to be with that person. And that, as the Buddha said, is to be compassionate.
I knew you were going to say that.
And compassion has no judgment in it.
Yeah, and you can hear in the question that she asks. I think it's that she asks where it's trying to fit. Like what I hear in that question is I'm trying to make that person get something. And that doesn't work in relationships. Most people are trying to do that. I'm trying to make you think a certain way. I'm trying to make you act a certain way. That inevitably creates resistance to the other person. And so that's why Roy is answering with compassion, because that compassion is actually what helps release resistance from you and from the
And
other person.
and compassion doesn't mean you have to like it. Compassion is defined as being in another person's world, in their shoes. And when we're in their shoes, then there's the opportunity to ask questions around, well, tell me more about that. What's that experience for you that you're triggered right now?
Mm-hmm.
Just
Yeah.
talk to me. What is that? How is that for you? What's
So
happening over there?
so this person added, I'm in an argument with my partner, and I can identify him and that he's feeling inadequate in what I said. I tried to say with love and care, and he will not acknowledge that he's being reactive.
Okay. But who's the one doing the interpreting here?
Well, the obvious answer is this person is.
Yeah.
But I think what I hear in that is just kind of right back to what you said, is that compassion and curiosity for that person's feeling. Okay, you're feeling inadequate. Tell me what's going on there. What has you feel inadequate? Versus what most of us do, which is, I said it loving. Why are you feeling inadequate? I was nice to you. Why are you reacting to me? And so now we got two reactions just reacting to each other, and curiosity's left the building.
Well, and that is one of my more favorite words out there to eliminate out of the English language is the word why.
Yeah, I agree. Which
It
is
causes
tough. That's a tough one, Roy, because
it
a
is
lot
it
of coaches
is
and people like hang on to that world. Like, you got to have a strong why. That's a very common thing. You got to have a strong why. You and
yes.
I don't operate like that. We don't think like that.
No, I use the word what because
Yeah.
you can actually say to you can in that situation you can say, why are you triggered right now? And then
Yeah, let's play that out. You do that. Let's do some role play here. You say, why are you triggered right now? And I say, well, because you did something to upset me.
okay, all right, Simon, why are you so triggered right now?
Because you triggered me.
Okay, well, why did I trigger you?
Because of how you acted, how you spoke to me. I can't believe you said that.
Well, why do you think the way that I act, uh, what, you know, why do you think that? I was just doing what I was doing.
Well, you weren't being considerate of me.
Well, why would you think that? I'm always considerate of you. Jeez.
No, you haven't been the last blah, 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 15 times, 10 years, whatever. Like, it just goes on. You can see how
Yeah.
in this dialogue that me and Roy are doing, it's like every time that question is asked, it's left with my reason to defend myself, my reason and justification for my behavior that doesn't work. And I see people do it all the time to each other. And I also see it a ton when we're berating ourselves. Why
Yeah. So
did I do that?
yeah. So the obvious one is, Simon, I'm sensing that you're somewhat triggered right now. Are you willing to share with me what has you be triggered?
Yeah, what's going on for you? Yeah, like you can hear the whole different world there. What's going on for you?
Yeah.
And now I'm going, well, I feel hurt by what you said, and I didn't like it, and I'm not sure how to deal
Okay.
with it.
Okay. Well, what was it that I said that had you feel hurt, first of all?
And this is the interesting one, because when you ask this question, most of us can't even remember what it actually was.
Yeah.
I'm so
So,
caught. Like, I would actually look in that moment and I go, what did you say that triggered me?
yeah. Well, just, let's play it out. So, Simon, what did I say that had you be triggered, that you feel hurt by?
Well, you were telling me what to do.
Oh my goodness. Oh, Simon, I apologize. I am sorry that if you were left with that, I was telling you what to do. That was not my intention, and I want to be responsible for that. I left you with that I was telling you what to do. I'm sorry.
I'm laughing because as you say that, I'm like trying to think of how I can be more mad at you, and it's difficult. It's actually difficult because Roy is doing what great coaches do and what great partners do. Is you're doing such a good job of getting into my world and my experience in a way that I really feel like you understand me, that it's so hard to be mad at you.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you were still mad at me, and I would ask you, I mean, what's having you still be mad at me?
Yeah. You just keep the curiosity going.
Yeah, it's curious because I actually, so right there, what do I have my attention on in that moment, in this situation between us?
In that moment, you have your attention on me and my experience, and you want to know what it's like.
Yes. And the why thing is I have my attention on defending myself against your attack.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, completely different worlds here, and I am out to eliminate the word why out of the English language.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I saw one of our
Just
coaching calls yesterday, and someone they wish they would have broken up with this person earlier, and then the self-deprecating thoughts go, why didn't I do that? And now there's a blame. Oh, I'm so stupid, and then just around and
yeah,
around we go. It just doesn't work. It doesn't work.
yeah, I call it the that's what that word brings. Yeah.
Sure.
So we're here. We can really see what happens when we have our attention on the language that we're using, and our attention is being highly and radically responsible. This is a new term I've created, is using the word radically responsible, and I love that because it has me keep looking and looking and looking,
Like where
like
else?
beyond highly responsible,
Where
like
else? Where else can I make a difference? Where else can I influence something?
yeah, where else can I be responsible for what I caused,
Yeah.
or am I creating love and affinity in every moment? What you know Having my attention on what matters to me. Well, I think
Yeah, and it's
it's a
easy.
phenomenal subject.
Me too. I think it's a huge emphasis on what we do as coaches, and to help people, you know, maybe receive this word a little bit more effectively around responsibility. What we mean when we say that is, what can I have power over? What can I influence? And when you
Mm,
spend time looking at that, you can discover ways that you can influence your life that you didn't even think were possible.
mm.
And that is a fascinating way to live. That is a thrilling way to live because we start to expand on our ability to make a difference in our life.
Mhm. Mm. Well, and I just had this thought here. There's so much discourse going on in the world right now that we as humans have, it occurs like we have no say over anything what's going on, and how
Completely.
the level that's happening around us, from wars to the price of groceries to rent. And however, we do ultimately have a say over the words that we're using and how we leave people and what we have our attention on.
Yeah.
And when we get there and the level of power that we actually have, and again, as you said it, not power over, power equals the velocity in which our intentions are realized. So to look from there, what am I actually intending here? Am I intending to make a difference with my partner, or my friends, or my family? Am I intending to make a difference with my coworkers and empower them in their field? Or is my attention on making them wrong? What do I have my attention on here?
Now,
So to be that responsible is just like mind blowing, like what that could create in the world if we all operated that way would radically alter the whole context of the planet. And I think it's time.
let's
It's
go.
time.
That's what we're doing here. When I created Love Understood, it was built with the mission to create a world of people in partnership. That's
Mm,
the world we're out to create, a world of people in partnership. And that's not just romantic love. That's being a team.
mm,
That's being a team
mm,
with your friends, with your colleagues, with politicians, with whatever works to have us be partners in this thing. So I think we should leave it there. But there is one thing, Roy. You say so many brilliant things, and sometimes you say them so quickly it's easy to miss it. You said something so amazing around power that I'm sure lots of people flew right over their head. The definition of power that we're talking about is what?
Power equals the velocity in which an intention is realized. So
power equals the velocity in which an intention is
realized. So if I say X is going to happen and it takes a year, I'm not so powerful. If I say X is going to happen and it happens in 5 minutes, I'm a powerful person.
Depending on what X is, of course.
Well, of course, that's the variable.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's always, power is the velocity in which an intention is realized, which is not in the world of dominating someone, because people often will collapse power with domination. They are completely different words, completely different contexts.
Well, that being said, we're here to empower you, to give you power in what matters to you. So if you're curious about working with us, I'll share some details on how to do that in the captions. Thank you guys so much for joining. Thank you so much, Roy, for who you are and all that you brought to this conversation.
Thank you. It was fun. Thank you. I love you.
Later.
Yeah.
Love you.